Right now at Fresno State, we've got a lot of stuff going on, but one thing in particular that we have is kind of our almond harvest. We went last week and we got some video of some sweeping. We're going to talk about that today in lab. If you're watching this after lab, then you'll already know that. But then next week, what we're going to do is we're actually going to get some video of the harvesting, so actually picking up the nuts and putting them into the carts, putting them in the trailer, that whole process. So we'll be covering that stuff next week. But we just wanted to kind of give it like a general overview of almond harvesting, just kind of the general process and things that have kind of led up to this. Some things we weren't able to get videos of, but we'll go ahead and we'll just kind of talk about it. We'll try to get whatever we can, some videos and stuff of what's actually happening out here at Fresno State. Let me move my video down. So prior to harvesting these almonds, we obviously need to make sure that they are ready to be harvested. And one way we do that is by taking a look at the hull split. Hull split is when this outer kind of shell on this almond starts to obviously split. Once it's kind of split, it's kind of open, these things are going to be able to be taken off of the tree. They're going to be put on the ground, and then they're going to be raked up and go through a bunch of different processes. We're going to talk about that. But hull split, begins when about 1% of the almonds have opened. Okay, and we should harvest these things when it's about 95%. You're never going to have everything. You're never going to have all the almonds, perfectly in hull split. If you wait too long, you can have a lot of issues. You can get some rots on them. You could, it's just not the right time, for us to do that. So when we're trying to harvest is when we get about 95% of the tree is in hull split and it's completely opened up and ready. That's going to allow us to actually shake these nuts off of the tree. If we try to do it when it's green like this, we're not really going to be able to get them to drop. At 95%, we may end up having some that are left on. And we actually go through in the wintertime and any of the almonds that do not get shaken off because they were maybe a little bit green still when we shook the trees, we're going to shake them off in the wintertime. We call them mummies. You can get brown rot from those if you leave them on the tree, so it's important to get those things off. But we want to make sure that we collect a majority of the crop that we're trying to produce. We don't want to wait too long on these things because we don't want to have issues. But anything that we do have extra, we will kind of take these things off later on as we go through. So what we do before we actually get that hull split to kind of occur, and this is kind of why that timing is really kind of important, we need to make sure we prep the field because there's a lot of different machines, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to actually put into these fields. So making sure that those machines can go through and that we can harvest this thing easily, and we can do it with minimal kind of damage or effect on the environment is really kind of what we're looking for. So the first thing, typically we're going to have grass or any other kind of organic material that's going to be down the center of the rows. We need to make sure that those things are removed. So what we end up doing, we typically maintain for like beneficial bugs, just some grass or something down the middle of the rows. To make sure we have like beneficial bugs and different things that are going to be in there. But when we're harvesting, we got to get rid of it. So we mow it down, we spray it, we get rid of it completely. The other thing that we do is we level the field. So we take a float through that field and we basically just kind of float it, and it basically just levels off that field. As we go through and we do different operations, we get gophers, we get different things, squirrels that are in there, they kind of tear it up. We end up having to, float them. So every time, once we kill that grass off, we basically float that field, make sure that it's nice and level for all the machines to be able to run through and get a good harvest. And then we shut the water off prior to that harvest. What we want to do is we want to reduce that moisture content in that soil. If we've got a lot of moisture content in that soil, what's going to happen is it's going to absorb in the nuts as we drop them on the ground, and you're going to get mildew, you're going to get mold that's going to form on those things, and then it basically renders that kind of useless. So we've got to make sure we have a nice dry ground, which means we're going to shut this water off, and that's going to be prior to that hull split, or kind of at the start of kind of that hull split. Really kind of depends on varieties and all that kind of stuff. But because we shut this water off, we can't let there and sit. We can't let this tree sit and try to get to 100% of hull split, because what can happen is we can end up killing our trees off, because this water can be shut off sometimes 2-3 weeks, and it's important that we time these things correctly. So we've got to have a nice dry field, And we've got to kind of, look at when that hole split's occurring. We've got to look at all those things to make sure. So there's a lot of kind of prior stuff that kind of happens and decisions that need to happen prior to harvesting. Once we do reach that 95% hole split though, we're going to take a shaker onto the tree. And I was trying to get a video of this, but unfortunately I wasn't able to because they shook and I didn't even know about it. But basically what we do is we clamp the machine around the tree, around the trunk of the tree. These things have weights on the inside. We'll talk a little bit more in detail on these probably next week, but it's going to shake the tree and all the almonds are going to fall. Prior to having all this technology, we used to just take rubber mallets. We used to hit the tree and it would just basically shake everything off and the almonds would fall and then we would just kind of collect it. With technology and machinery increasing, we can make things more efficient. Instead of having a bunch of people, you can have one person that goes through the field and shakes all these things. And you can get it done a lot quicker. There are two styles. We do have two of them at Fresno State here. We have a front boom style, and we've got a side boom style. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for and kind of the process that you're going to go through as you're shaking. There's not necessarily an advantage to one or the other. It's just two different styles for two different things. So we'll try to play this video here. In fact, I probably need to make sure that my computer sounds on. So we'll play this video real quick for you to kind of see what the shakers look like. Take that tree. Back it up. Don't want to run over. So kind of a little example of that shaking there. Again, they're going to go in reverse as they're doing this where they don't run over it. They do have little sweeper pads on the bottom to kind of sweep the almonds out of the way. Not all of the systems have that. The newer ones typically are. If you got an older one, you may not have that on there. But we still don't want to run over the almonds. We don't want to have to worry about that. So, when we're doing this, we're going in reverse. Here you can see a side, boom one. They don't have to kind of come in at an angle. This boom essentially just extends out, so they just drive in a straight line and they extend that thing out. They shake the tree, they retract it back, and they go back. Depending on what type of almonds we have, typically in a lot of almond orchards, we're going to have the right-hand tree is going to be one variety, the left-hand tree is going to be a different variety because we need those things to cross-pollinate. And if those nuts are a different shape, we cannot harvest them at the same time. So we may go through a field and we may shake every other row, and then we'll harvest, collect it, do all that kind of stuff. We'll add some water back in, and then we're going to harvest the other row later on. So we might end up going through this process twice. And some of the stuff and the things that I'm going to show you next week, the things that we were sweeping in, was Butte Padre mixes. Those nuts are very similar to each other, so we actually just shake everything down at once. But there are some things that a lot of fields we have to worry about. Newer varieties like the Independents, that's just one variety that goes through, so they can shake everything. They go through that field once. They don't have to end up kind of changing stuff. So just some things to kind of make note of, kind of understand, and kind of be aware of that this process can take quite a bit. So once we shake these almonds and we let them down on the trees, we want these things to dry, typically anywhere between 5 days to 2 weeks. So we could have this water off for quite a while. What we're really looking for is about 12% moisture or less to be able to kind of sweep those almonds up. You want to make sure that they're out, they're laid out, that they're kind of exposed and they can dry. If we clump them up and we kind of bound them in a little pile or a little windrow, they're not going to be able to dry, especially the ones on the inside. But once they do dry, we sweep them up into windrows. That's what the sweeper is going to be. That's what we're going to go over and lab this week. And we'll show you some videos. We'll kind of talk about that. So we're going to sweep them up into windrows, which is going to make life a little bit easier on that harvest. A lot of these ones, this one's an old one. It doesn't have a cab. But essentially these things, they have little paddles that are going to bring the almonds in. They've got some tines and stuff that are on the inside. I'll show you that as we get through in lab. And then they're also going to have blowers that are going to blow stuff from over the berms and kind of keep, those almonds, to try to make sure we get all the almonds within the field. We can't kind of sweep in between the trees or right close to the trees. That's kind of where these blowers can come. But we'll talk about the process. We'll talk about how we actually do that, and we'll go from there. When we go to actually, once we sweep these things into windrows, we really don't need to wait at all. We could theoretically come right behind there and pick them up. Sometimes we wait maybe a couple days. Really depends on where machines are at, the availability and what we have. These machines can be self-propelled, which means they have their own standalone unit, or they can be tractor driven. In this example right here, there's a PTO. This one's going to be hooked up to a tractor. The tractor is going to give it power for this thing to pick up. Again, next week, this is what we're going to try to show you, get some videos of actual harvest that we have out here. So we'll go a little bit more in depth in these things. But essentially, they're going to pick up the almonds that have been left in the windrows. The one issue that this stuff does create, sweeping does as well, but also kind of harvesting, is that it creates a lot of dust. This is one of the biggest complaints that almond farmers get, is that when they're harvesting, they're basically destroying the environment. They're creating a bunch of dust in the air. There's a lot of different ways that we try to adjust that. We try to maybe stop the dust, reduce the dust. But really right now, the best process that we have is really what we use to be able to do this. And with the demand in almonds, as it is, people are going to want them, and we've got to figure out ways that we can pick up these things, do it effectively and efficiently, and we still have to kind of worry about the environment. We've got to be cautious of that, which is why we're trying to invent different ways and do different things that's going to help them. Essentially, what this thing does is it picks them up from those windrows. It's going to drop it in that little cart that's kind of behind that, and that cart's going to get shuttled into an elevator, and it's going to load that into a semi truck to be able to haul it off to the holder. And we'll show you this video again. We're going to try to get some more of this. You can see the dust. Not fine. Okay, so it's a very, very dusty thing. If you've got a lot of high winds, things like that, obviously you're going to why that was going through. Here's a kind of another example, again, self-propelled machine, kind of like we saw there. Basically, it's going to pick it up. We'll talk about the inside of this, how this thing works. But essentially, it's picking it up. It's dropping them into carts. We've got a lot of different carts, a lot of different styles. Which ones that they kind of move the almonds around, how they dump them, how they put them into the elevator. That stuff's all going to change. But we'll try to show you a couple different examples in next week's lab. So essentially, once we get that cart, there's going to be another like shuttle tractor or something that's going to grab that cart on the back of that thing, and then pause that. It's going to take them into this elevator here. This elevator is going to move them up and load them into the truck. So you can see right there, this is a little side dump. It's got hydraulics. It lifts it up and dumps it. Some of them are bottom dumps. Some of them will actually have a little escalator in itself, and it'll just kind of move them. Really kind of depends on how much money you want to spend, and how fancy of equipment you want. But these side booms are kind of nice. You drive right beside it. You turn the elevator on, it rolls those things up, and that's pretty much it. So the elevators, they can, vary in size and different things. Some of them at the end, they have something that can kind of turn. I've seen a lot of people that, they have to, be in really kind of specialized areas. They maybe don't have a lot of space. They're right next to a road. And so they got to park this elevator on a road. They can't let it just kind of stretch out. And so you need to have something that can kind of have like a little 90-degree angle to where you're not going to be blocking that road as you're doing that. But essentially that elevator, that's all it's doing is basically just lifting those almonds up as we're dumping them. Here you can see kind of another example. You've got a little almond cart right there backing up to it. This one actually, this is a good example of that one that kind of turned to a 90-degree. It goes up to here, and then you can kind of turn that thing. You can adjust it as you're filling these things up. Sometimes what we end up having to do is back the trucks up and down as we're doing it because it might load up one area, so we have to back it up. These ones, if you've got the little hydraulic controls, you can easily just move that thing and try to help fill that truck a little bit better. Or, like I said, you can kind of go on the side with it if you need to. Once we are done harvesting, and whether or not we're going to run through this field again, or if we're harvesting everything all at once, we need to make sure that that water gets back on because those trees are going to be stressed. They're going to have, a lot of, like they're not going to have water for, a couple of weeks, and they need to get that stuff back in there because we don't want to kill our trees when we're done with these things. If it's real hot and everything's just, dry, that those trees are going to be really stressed. Right now, it's kind of cooled down a little bit. We don't really have as much heat. It may be a little bit better on these trees, but typically around like August when we start doing this stuff, it's going to be hot and these trees are going to be stressed. And then, like I said, if we need to do this and repeat this for the other variety, this thing might have, 6 weeks that these trees are going to be stressed. We're not going to do that. So it's incredibly important that we get water on those things after we harvest to make sure that those trees are able to kind of bounce back up and survive through this stuff. So it's a tough process, but hopefully that kind of helps explain a little bit. Like I said, the next 2 weeks, we're going to kind of cover some almond harvesting and show you guys some of those things.